Ever get this feeling like there's a whole universe just rumbling around inside you?
Yeah.
Well, today we're diving deep right into that world, talking about the gut microbiome, that massive community of microbes living right inside us. And get this, they're not just along for the ride, they actually have a huge impact on our well-being, like everything from how we digest our food to how clearly we think.
Wild, right?
It really is. You know, for the longest time, we had no idea just how important this hidden world was. But here's the thing. This isn't exactly news to everyone. Some ancient cultures, they seem to have a pretty good understanding of gut health, even without all the fancy labs and equipment we have today.
Totally. And to help us wrap our heads around all this, we're going to be listening in on a conversation between two brilliant minds. Dr. Emran Mayer, who's a leading expert in microbiome research, and Sadhguru, a renowned yogi and spiritual leader. Talk about a cool pairing. You've got cutting-edge science meeting ancient wisdom. And you know what really struck me? Their perspectives, even though they're coming from such different places, they actually often complement each other. It's like they're both looking at this super intricate tapestry just from opposite sides. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So Dr. Mayer, he starts off by really driving home just how massive this inner world is. He's throwing around words like trillions when he's describing these microbes. And he keeps saying, we're just starting to understand this whole complex ecosystem.
And it's not even just the sheer number of these microbes. It's like the amazing diversity, right? And they're all interacting with each other and with our cells in these really complex ways, like a whole bustling city going on in our gut. And what's really wild is that ancient Indian texts, specifically Jain texts, they seem to get this. Centuries ago, they understood the importance of this inner universe.
You're talking about that concept of niga, right? I'll admit, I'd never even heard that word before.
It's so interesting. Niga, basically, it refers to these almost invisible beings, these microbes that are literally everywhere, influencing everything. It seems like ancient Indian thought it was really big on the interconnectedness of all life, even at this tiny microscopic level. And what's crazy is that modern science, we're only just now catching up with things like super powerful microscopes and gene sequencing.
It really makes you wonder what else is out there, what other secrets we could uncover if we could just bridge that gap between this ancient wisdom and what we're learning with modern science. It's like Sadhguru says at one point, ancient Indians, they actually calculated the speed of light and they figured out that the earth revolves around the sun, and they did all this way before telescopes, way before modern astronomy. It blows your mind.
And that's exactly his point. Sadhguru brings that up to show just how powerful human perception can be. He uses this analogy of a skilled tracker. You know, they can tell you everything about an animal that just passed through just by looking at the tiniest clues, a broken twig here, a footprint there. No fancy equipment needed, but their understanding, it's incredibly accurate.
It's like they had these different senses or ways of knowing that maybe we're losing touch with.
Exactly. And that's where I find Dr. Mayer's take so interesting. He makes this argument that all those scientific tools we depend on, they're basically just extensions of our own senses. Telescopes, they help us see farther, just like microscopes let us see things at a totally different scale.
So it's not so much about having one right way of seeing things. It's more like recognizing that different approaches can uncover different layers of understanding.
Totally. And maybe, like Sadhguru seems to suggest, there are ways to actually strengthen our perception, to tap into these deeper levels of knowing through these ancient practices like yoga, meditation, things like that.
Man, that's a thought, isn't it? Like Sadhguru says later in their conversations, like, if you don't know how to get home, you might use a GPS. But if you know the way, you just go. Maybe we've become a little too reliant on our metaphorical GPS, and it's time to dust off our own internal navigation system.
And, speaking of navigation, that makes me think about the vagus nerve. That's that crucial connection, like a highway between our gut and our brain. And it's not just about, digestion and stuff anymore. Dr. Mayer's research, it suggests we might need to completely rethink how we look at neurological disorders.
It's a whole new way of thinking, for sure. Dr. Mayer, he talks about his research on things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and he actually suggests that these diseases, they might actually start in the gut years before anything shows up in the brain. Wait, so you're saying that gut problems could be like an early warning sign for serious brain conditions later on?
That's what his research seems to indicate. It really challenges that old view that those conditions are only happening in the brain, and instead it shows how deeply connected our gut health is with our neurological well-being. And the vagus nerve, that's a key player here. It's like a super fast information highway. constantly sending messages between all those trillions of gut microbes and our brain cells. It's nonstop.
So basically, our gut's just chatting away with our brain all the time, sending messages through this cable. So what are they saying to each other? What kind of information are they sharing?
Well, we've known for a while that gut signals can impact things like our mood, even our appetite. But it gets even more interesting. Dr. Mayer's research takes it a step further, and it reveals that those little microbes in our gut, they're super sensitive to our emotional states.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that my gut bacteria, they actually know if I'm stressed out or anxious?
Exactly. He explains how those microbes have receptors for certain neurotransmitters, like dopamine and norepinephrine. Those are the chemicals in our brain that really control our mood, our stress response. Basically, it's like those microbes are listening in on our emotions, and then they respond accordingly.
That is wild. So it's like our gut is like a second brain reacting to every feeling we have. So does that mean if I'm freaking out about that presentation I have tomorrow, it could actually be messing with my gut bacteria?
It's definitely possible. It goes both ways, you see. Our gut sends signals to the brain, but our mental state, how we're feeling, that impacts our gut environment too. And this is where I think Sadhguru's perspective is really valuable. He talks about how in ancient India, there is this practice of approaching food with a sense of reverence, even gratitude, before you ate.
It's like that saying, you are what you eat, but like on a whole other level. It's not just about the food, it's about the energy, the intention, everything you bring to the table.
Exactly. And then Sadhguru, he compares that mindful approach to how we eat in Western societies, often rushed, not really thinking about it. He suggests that this disconnect we have from where our food comes from not being present when we eat, it might be part of the reason why we're seeing so many health problems these days.
It's like we've forgotten that food is more than just fuel, you know? It's information, it's energy. It's all connected to our well-being on so many levels. And Dr. Mayer actually touches on this too, because he's concerned about how the nutritional value of our food is going down.
Yeah, he doesn't sugarcoat it. He uses this example of an orange. And he says that today, you'd have to eat 8 oranges to get the same amount of nutrients that you would have gotten from just 1 orange back in the 1920s.
8 oranges? Curiously. What's causing such a huge drop like that?
Well, Dr. Mayer says it's all about modern agriculture. He says that using all those chemical fertilizers and pesticides, plus the way we farm so intensively, it's basically sucking the life out of the soil, making it harder for plants to absorb those important nutrients.
So it's not even just about going organic. It's about finding farmers who are actually working to make the soil healthier, right?
Exactly. And Sadhguru, he brings up this really cool observation about elephants, how they eat in the forest. It really highlights this whole idea.
Okay, you've got to tell me more about these elephants. What's going on with how they eat?
So Sadhguru was watching elephants in the forest, and he noticed how picky they were when they were eating. Like, they'd completely devour certain trees, but then totally ignore others nearby.
So it's not just a free-for-all buffet for them, huh? There's a system to it.
Yeah, exactly. And it turns out there's actually a scientific reason for this. Plants, they've got this whole communication system going on. So when elephants eat a lot from a particular type of tree, those trees, they release these chemical signals, almost like a warning signal, to other plants nearby, the same kind of plant.
No way. The trees are gossiping about the hungry elephants.
It's kind of like that. And it's not just for fun either. Those signals actually make the other trees change their chemistry so their leaves don't taste as good, or maybe even get a little toxic. It's like a defense mechanism to stop the elephants from eating too much and make sure the trees survive.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
It's like the whole forest is talking to itself, protecting itself.
Right. And it just shows how much we can learn from paying attention to how nature works, how everything is connected, just like Sadhguru and Dr. Mayer keep saying.
It's like a reminder that we're not separate from nature. We're a part of this whole web of life. And just like those elephants listening to the trees, we also have this ability to sense what's good for us deep down. Maybe we've just forgotten how to tap into it.
Exactly. And that takes us back to mindfulness, being present not just with what we eat, but also how we choose our food. It's about finding that food that works with our own internal world, respecting the environment, and appreciating where it all comes from.
And what about fermented foods? Everyone's talking about those. How do they fit in with all this gut health stuff?
Dr. Mayer and Sadhguru both agree that fermented foods, they can be really good for our microbiome. But they say it's super important to choose the right kinds of fermented foods and not go overboard, eat them in moderation.
So it's not as simple as just like anything fermented is good.
Not exactly. Dr. Mayer talks about how people have been eating fermented bites for ages, and our gut, it's used to it, it actually benefits from it. But he says to watch out for foods that have been fermented for too long or have added sugar or preservatives.
So quality over quantity when it comes to fermented stuff.
Right. Sadhguru actually uses this example of idli, that's a South Indian food, it's fermented. And he says you can tell if it's been fermented right just by looking at it, how it smells, even the sound it makes when it cooks.
It's like he's saying, trust your senses. They know what's up.
Exactly. It's about getting back in touch with that ancient wisdom that understood how to prepare food in a way that's good for us.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive into the fascinating world of the microbiome, what are the big takeaways you hope our listeners will remember?
I think the most important thing is to remember that we have this amazing universe living inside us, this community of microbes, and it has a huge impact on our health. Everything from digestion to our mood to how well our brains work. A healthy gut is essential for a healthy life.
And it's not a one-way street either. It's a two-way conversation. What we think, how we feel, even our stress levels, it all affects our gut. Everything's connected.
Exactly. And that leads us to the second big takeaway, mindfulness. When we pay attention to our eating habits, choose food that's good for us, support sustainable agriculture, even take a moment of gratitude before we eat, we're not just taking care of ourselves, we're creating a healthier planet too.
So to all our listeners out there, as you go about your day, remember, you've got trillions of little helpers inside you working hard to keep you healthy and feeling good. And when you choose to support their well-being, you're not just nourishing yourself, you're helping to create a healthier, more balanced world.